Hello, 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 beautiful stars. Courtney here, Stars of the Morning Light. And this is Edgar Cayce Life Skill Studies, I believe number 66. What a good number. We are doing his biography. So, how this works. If you're new here, welcome. We are always either in a source material, which I don't have one in front of me to show you. One of his source materials, like on reincarnation, the millennium, all of his readings, and or in his biography. We have not been in his biography in, I think, over a month. So I'm going to catch everybody up again, and then we're going to dive right in. So happy Wednesday, everybody. These usually do come out on a Wednesday, and I am Courtney, host of Stars of the Morning Light, also a fellow Akashic reader. So, where we left off with the last biography video, and in the description below, there is a link there to all of the Edgar Cayce playlists. I see that Lori came in. Good to see you, my dear. Lori, I wish I did have some coffee before I started here because I'm yawning a lot. So bear with me. And I am live, folks. And I do say hello to those that come in. And I see that Kim came in as well. Good to see you, my dear. So we left off when this big German doctor, psychologist, came to visit Edgar kind of unexpectedly. Just showed up, and his name was Munzenberg. And usually, those who caught wind of Edgar, they were more in the medical field than the actual psychology, what's happening with his mind field of studies, because Edgar was known for giving medical readings. Well, by this time, though, we have learned that Edgar gained confidence within himself, kind of more authority, also based out of having to provide and take care of his family in a right manner. He was able to start to induce himself into readings, not so much needing and relying on someone else. But yet he still worked with Ketchum and No and all these fellas. Well, this German doctor shows up and spends at least a week, 2 weeks or so with Edgar. I think he witnessed himself, I believe, like 11 different case studies where Edgar would do the reading for the person, and then they would go to a doctor like Ketchum to get the treatment. Well, Munzenberg was extremely impressed because he was going there to, write Casey off, call him a fraud, figure out what he's doing, find it out. And he spending that time with Casey and the family, watching him do what he does, just being in Casey's presence, he could get the sense that Casey was genuine, very genuine with this. And this is where we left off. Now, do remember as well, shortly before this, Gertrude, his wife, was very ill. She's on death's door, and they lost their second child. The baby was sick. She was very sick. Come to find out, she had tuberculosis from when she went a year or two prior to take care of her brother who had been dying of TB. So she is still in recovery when strange people are still coming to the door to figure out who Casey is. So do take that in. She's still, and Gertrude was a little lady. I picture Gertrude kind of like my grandmother who was like 4'10". I mean, they're very fragile, smaller women, right? So when they're sick, it's going to take a bit more to recover. And TB is a serious thing to recover from. And I see that Chloe came in. Good to see you, my dear. So that's where we're kind of starting. if you want to go back and go, "Whoa, who's this Gertrude person? What is his life about? He's married with a kid? What's going on?" Please utilize the playlist below. All of his all of the episodes are either titled biography or bio and or one of his source materials. So that is where we are, folks. And I want to remind people too, at the end of his last bio video, I was emphasizing Casey really coming into his own. He was starting to mature as a father, as a provider, as a reader, as a business owner. So that's where he got the confidence of like, I can induce myself. I can get a reading myself. Now, like I said, did he still do that a lot? No. He was still working with people, all these fellas, because it was quote unquote a business. It was a partnership. Noel had the hotel that when people came into Hopkinsville to see Casey, they would stay at the hotel. Ketchum would put Casey over under for the reading, get the reading, and then Ketchum would also heal be the doctor these people see. So it was a partnership. And do remember, they were also wanting to build a hospital, and that did not pan out. So let's get into where we were. All right, beloveds. I'm going to read a bit. And I'm going back to Munzenberg because when Munzenberg got home, he thought he was going to disclose how Casey was a fraud, but he found out that he wasn't. So he knew that he did not understand what all was going on with Casey in his consciousness. He knew enough as being a professor, a doctor of this, that he knew that he did not fully understand. So he thought he was going to first write a paper. But after actually witnessing and being with it, he knew that he could not give it enough credit that what Casey does, he just knew he couldn't speak about it. So he didn't write his journal to all of his peers and to those in the educational field of psychology, but he did brag on Casey a lot to all of his peers. And later down the road, one of those people that heard from Munzenberg does reveal more about Casey, and it's great. But we'll get to that further into the biography. With the praise that Munzenberg gave also came some advice, which he shared with Casey in private. Munzenberg thought that Casey was running with the wrong bunch, quote unquote. He was referring to No and Ketchum, and perhaps even Edgar's father, Leslie. Munzenberg urged Edgar to continue listening to the voice, quote unquote, as he referred to the source, but to reconsider the company he kept. That is like an ongoing theme now, isn't it? From Edgar's dad to all the doctors and men that have been around Casey, wanting to exploit him, wanting to use him, wanting to study him. And the subscribers here can remember when we talked about how they put him on a stage and he was in a trance and they started poking and prodding him. This is an ongoing thing. Gertrude was not surprised to hear Munzenberg say this because she was convinced of the same thing. She had not trusted Ketchum from the start. especially not since Leslie had broken his kneecap and Ketchum himself had begun conducting the readings. So, Leslie is Casey's father. Earlier episodes, we discussed how Leslie's brother is actually Casey's biological father, but that's okay. It's all in the family. Hush, hush. But Leslie is not the best of the bunch. Leslie would put his son under, but sometimes it was also Ketchum. Remember how they met down in Alabama, um, Mississippi, that Ketchum was the one, and then Ketchum brought him back to Hopkinsville in Kentucky? So they would switch on and off. But Leslie has recently broken his kneecap. Who knows? Leslie, he probably fell down drunk somewhere. So, Gertrude never liked Ketchum. She's not a fan of Casey's dad, Leslie. She's not a fan of this guy, No, who is really just there for the profit for the hotel. So, but because Monksonberg was genuine, he was actually a really good guy. And he left Casey with that of like, hey, it is clear to me you're not running with the good crowd here. And you are. Like, he was bragging on Edgar to Edgar. He kept saying, you're sincere, you're genuine, it's coming from the heart, it's coming from the heart. So this finally gets into Edgar, because I think other rumors started spiraling, getting around town, especially apparently Ketchum had an extramarital affair with some French teacher down yonder, and he was paying for her to live in her apartment. So Ketchum is paying for some lady to live her life. He's paying for some other stuff. He's doing all these things. Word is starting to spread. So, lovely Edgar, who he is, right? He writes Ketchum a letter. I love Edgar. Everybody, Edgar was a Pisces. They're not the best about confrontation. We love them regardless. This Leo would have walked right up to Ketchum and been like, listen, what are you doing? Where's the money? What's going on? So Edgar decides to write him a letter, or write a letter, I should say. He writes a letter to a woman who had reached out for a reading. So back when, because this is the turn of the century, this is still 1910s, people would write in, give their name, give their information. I need a reading for X, Y, and Z. And they would send $25. That was the cost of a reading back then, which I find to be very expensive. And then Edgar would go under, they would record it, and then they would mail that information back to the person. So Edgar knew of a woman who had sent in for a reading. And so he followed up with her. He followed up with her and said, hey, how did the reading go? Did it help? Did it heal you? That woman got back to Edgar and said, I never received a reading. See, here's the thing, folks. Edgar was allowing everyone else to manage his life, of this aspect of his life, because he truly wanted to be a photographer. So he would allow somebody else to put him under, so he wouldn't even be aware of what was going on, what was being asked, what was happening during and after. Someone would take the notes and they would mail it back to the person. He would not even know if all of that transaction fully happened. He probably also didn't really know where all the money was going. He thought they were saving to truly build a hospital. But that dream had gone and left, and he wasn't really paying attention to the fact that it was gone fully. So he writes this letter, finds this out, and he confronts Ketchum with a letter. I love him. I love him. He confronts Ketchum with a letter, which actually, in today's world, that's you sending an email so you have record of it, right? That's you sending an email of like, I'm going to confront you, partner, business partner, um, and I want record of all his transactions, right? All his communication. So he writes Ketchum a letter, and Ketchum kind of starts to admit to things. So let's read for a moment. Edgar confronted Ketchum with a letter. Ketchum told Edgar that he, he had to change some of their rules because they needed the money to build a hospital. That with more gone, it was up to him and Noel. So when they first went into business, there was a whole lot of outlines as to how this needs to remain ethical, how this needs to remain heart-centered, spiritual. It's for the people, right? So Ketchum decided that he had to change up some of the rules because they lost a lot of money with this whole building a hospital thing, and Moore was gone, who was a prior business person with them. And they couldn't get it built getting $25 for a reading, not to mention all of their charity cases. Under pressure, Ketchum admitted taking readings on horse races and other forms of gambling. He referred to it as, quote unquote, getting a few tips. As far as Edgar was concerned, the partnership was finished. Ketchum himself must have realized it, for he left town before the partnership was officially dismantled. Edgar never saw him again. So, when Edgar's under, and he's not really even paying attention, he's not consciously aware of what's being asked, Ketchum would slip in there, "Hey, what horse is gonna win today? Hey, what riverboat that's coming through is gonna," whatever it may be, what what should I gamble with? What should I do to recover money? Because he thinks $25 is not enough for this is 1911. $25 is tons of money. But think of all those rumors. So where's the money really going? Cayce never actually did see him again. Ketchum left for Boston. He went back to he took a few courses in medical school to try to actually connect with Dr. Munzenberg, who was the one that came to visit. Oh my goodness, this shady guy. Remember, Ketchum's the one who down in Mississippi, I believe, also, like, did horrible blackmail to be able to get into the local country club. Yeah, he's that guy. Well, Munzenberg wanted never even gave him time of day when he was in Boston, but he did try to use that time when he went back to school for a little bit to spread how he worked with Edgar Cayce. Oh my goodness. So Leslie, his dad, of course, he's all distraught because now the business is pretty much done and over with. And I will tell you, folks, Edgar left and moved to Alabama. Let's just talk about Leslie for a moment. Leslie is all distraught because, his dad's pretty much a con artist as well. And he's thinking, oh my goodness, all my money's leaving. Everybody's thinking because Edgar jumped ship and was like, I'm done with all of you. I'm going to go to Alabama. And the reason he went to Alabama is because the HP Trestle Company wanted him to start a studio, a photography studio down in Selma, Alabama. And he said, I'm leaving. I'm leaving all of this. He leaves. Leslie's freaking out. So Leslie thinks, well, I'm going to sue Ketchum and Knoll because they technically changed the rules of the business. Small town, Kentucky, Hopkinsville. Not a bad idea to sue. I'm not, because they did. They clearly were taking money. They clearly were changing things up. They were not doing the service that they had stated would be provided, all sorts of things. So Leslie goes to sue. This case, it's a civil case, is presented in front of a judge that Cayce had done numerous readings for. This judge really knows Cayce. He knows that it works. Well, this is the turn of the century, right? In a small town. The judge, before the case could even be fully presented in court, and there wasn't like a jury or anything. This is just a civil case, judge decides, right? So this judge actually turned to Leslie first and said, well, if Ketchum's gone, I'd be willing to buy into his spot to be a partner. The judge. And Leslie contacted his son in Salem and Selma, Alabama. And Edgar was like, no, I'm done. I'm done with you people. Like all of it. I don't even really want to go back to Hopkinsville. I've been in Hopkinsville. I've left. I've gone back. I've left. I've gone back. I've left. I keep going back there when there's nothing there for me other than my wife and kid. And soon they're going to be here with me in Alabama. So he said, no, there is no business anymore. It's done. So Leslie tells the judge this before court even happens. Of like, nope, Edgar doesn't even want to be a part of anything. Well, how do you think that judge favored and made a ruling on their entire case? Oh my goodness, let me read, folks. This is why in today's world, in at least, I don't know, the US court system, if there is any connection like that, that judge cannot proceed over a case like that. The bias is way, way too much. So I'm gonna read because this gets, oh, Edgar. So the case was dismissed, and the two Cases, because Edgar did come back to Hopkinsville for exactly the day of the ruling. That's it. And to see his wife and kids because they were still living on the hill with her family as he's setting everything up in Alabama. We'll get to that. So he did come back just for the final ruling. Well, the ruling was that everything's dismissed. Oh, so Cayce was livid. Hear this. The case was dismissed, and the two Cases were asked to pay legal fees and make a small settlement. Leslie blamed himself for the chain of events that took the parties to court, dodgingly insisting that the partnership would have survived and things would have been all right had he not broken his kneecap. At Leslie's request, Edgar would briefly return to Hopkinsville from his new home in Alabama to be present when the ruling was handed down in March of 1913. It was a deeply unpleasant experience for him. In a letter he would later write to a business associate, Edgar described sitting in the courtroom with his father and being overcome with anger by what he believed was a great miscarriage of justice. He also described doing something that he had never done before, nor would do again, and which he would sincerely regret later. These are Edgar's words. Something within me at this time made me rise and ask the judge if I might speak without the judge ruling me in contempt of court. This is all Edgar's words. He wrote this to a colleague later in life. He said I might speak. That same thing within me said. So he said, Judge, after the ruling comes in, he said, can I speak without being in contempt? And the judge is probably thinking, yeah, because Edgar's like the most pleasant, beautiful man. He might seem angry right now, but this is what Edgar wrote or said to the judge. For the lie you have this day enacted, the worms of your body will eat you up while you are yet alive. So this is when it's like, okay, beloved, um, beloved Edgar Cayce, and I apologize, folks, if you are hearing my dog bark or the delivery man for some reason yelling outside my window. So let's just pause because I'm going to read that sentence to you again. Beloved Edgar Cayce, beautiful Pisces, beautiful water, beautiful mystic, beautiful heart, God-fearing man. This entire situation that had gone on, because he moved to Alabama in 1912. He started that position in January of 1912, creating a new studio in Selma, Alabama for the HP Trestle Company. So a year and 3 months has passed of this court stuff. And he has to go back, and he's just waiting on a ruling. And not only was it dismissed, then the judge says, you're going to also have to pay a lot of legal fees and actually somewhat of a settlement. Edgar, in his fury, wow, said, yes, beautiful Kim just said, Pisces, sometimes the eye of the storm. Yes, I have a lot of Pisces in my life, and yes, they can do that. We adore them, though. And usually when they do that, they are right. They are right. It's not that they're wrong. It's just their delivery. And here's the best example. So Edgar, and to the judge, says, this is his words. For the lie you have this day enacted, the worms of your body will eat you up while you are yet alive. I'm going to keep reading. According to Edgar Cayce, what he had willed, which is in quotations, what he had willed was indeed what later happened. Hookworms, or some form of intestinal worm infection, brought on anemia and eventually killed the judge. Edgar says this. Possibly it was only a coincidence, Edgar told his friend. Possibly it was playing with fire. Edgar left Hopkinsville, promising himself never to let his anger get the best of him again. He cursed that man. Plain and simple, he cursed that man. And Edgar, everyone, he's still a young man. I think he's what, 26 or so? 27. He's a father. He is also learning about all this stuff. Because remember, he is not a part of the quote unquote spiritualist movement of the turn of that century. He is not a part of that. He's not hanging out with Madame Blavatsky. He's not hanging out with all these other key players. He's not. He's trying to go to church. So he's not understanding how words can curse, will, as he would say, quote unquote, willed it on that man. But he has always later in life said that was one of his most biggest regrets because he saw it in real time. Oh my goodness, I did that to that man. Very powerful. Very, very powerful. Very powerful. And I see that seeker came in. Good to see you, Miss Shelley. Edgar Cayce liked to say that he moved to the river city of Selma, Alabama, for the simple reason that it was as good distance from anyone who knew what he did. Oh my god, I didn't even think about that too. Edgar already suffered through all of his life of people calling him a freak. And then in a courtroom where that is all documented, it's all being taken down. People heard, saw, wrote it down that he said that to that judge, and then that judge died. That poor man, not understanding, not knowing. I mean, this happens to everybody, really. It's why we check our temper, we check our anger, right? We check our motives before we let our mouth get control of things. So he would say he moved to Alabama to get as far away as he could. I will tell you, I have been to Selma, Alabama. Um, it does feel like you are far away from everything. Where it's situated, it's very interesting where the city is. It feels like you're just where to because to get to it, you're driving hours all around, um, and pretty much nothing. It does feel secluded. However, it was also true that the H.P. Trestle Company, which hired him to open a photography studio in the city in early January of 1912, had strategically chosen Selma because it was the fastest growing city in the entire state. Isn't that interesting? Not so much anymore. And yet, despite the hectic pace of life in a city suffering growing pains, its population of nearly 20,000 still enjoyed the gracious Alabentum, geez, I can't even talk, custom of sitting down, okay, of shutting down all day Thursday. So they would shut the town down, the city down, 20,000 people, which I don't even know how many people are there now. Oh, I'm probably going to take multiple trips to Selma. Um, I think some of the places, like the place of his studio, that building might still be there. If that is the case, and one of the churches that he was involved in, if that is the case, I will try to take some pictures and film of that. I don't ever know when I'm gonna go down to Selma until it's like I gotta go, because now I've run over to Selma, which is really still like 6 hours away, but it's a place to run away to, which is what which is what Edgar did. So back then in 1912, they were still doing the antebellum custom of shutting down all day Thursday so that visitors and residents alike could cool their feet in the currents of the Alabama River. Interesting. Interesting. Shutting down town an entire day so y'all can cool down. Hmm. Sounds good to me. So he's down there setting up this photography studio. Um, Gertrude and his son, Hugh Lynn, are still in Hopkinsville. And at this time, like I said, Leslie is doing that court stuff with Ketchum. Ketchum's in Boston trying to do his next round or whatever. Casey is in Selma. That studio is like ground level of like it's on Broad Street, which is their main street. Okay. It's on Broad Street. His studio's below, and the apartment that he's living in to set it up for Gertrude and Hugh Lynn to come is like 3 stories up. It's right next to a grocery store, and so the rats are kind of a problem, right? Y'all, I do truly believe that this building is still there. So I'm gonna hunt it down and find it. I really do think this building is still there. I was just down Broad Street a few months ago in like January. I really and I think one of those places that was the grocery store is still kind of like a convenience store. So yeah, we're doing this. All of us. You, me, we're doing it. We're going to take a little trip one day. And what was fascinating is Edgar, maybe some people might not know this. He was one clever guy. Do you remember like he would make games? He would create games. He created one called The Pit that actually kicked off really well, and then somebody stole it from him. He was always very clever, creative. And one of these things outside of this photography studio to get more business in is he would take like snapshots of people, and there was a big clock outside of the shop, like hanging above. And whenever he would switch out the pictures, and every week or something or day, he would say, okay, whoever it lands on when the dial hits 9 gets a free photo or something like that. Along the walls of the staircase leading up to the street below, Edgar hung many of his best framed photos. It was the display outside, however, that captured customers' attention. Mounted beside the door was a large, wind up 8-day clock with only one hand. Okay, with only one hand. 8 days. So you'd wind this up and it would go for 8 days, and then you'd have to wind it again. Okay. Edgar would put photos of people whose portraits he had recently done around the face of the clock. When the clock wound to stop, so when it would stop, the person whose picture the hand was pointing to received his or her photo finishing work for free. How clever is that? That is so clever. That is great marketing. Well, I don't know how he came up with that. That's like now we know of like the little spinning wheel, you know? Wow. That's great. So he gets involved with this church. And I want to say at this time, he's setting up the apartment for Hugh and Gertrude. He's getting this photo studio I mean, it's going. He's got clients. He's doing good. Then he gets involved with a church there. Edgar is like living his best life. He walked away from all the stuff in Hopkinsville. He is literally living his best life. And you would think, because we haven't heard anything, In the past, if we were going along with his, he hasn't changed his ways, he's still doing the same thing, he would also walked away from doing any readings. Not necessarily so. So he gets involved with this church, and y'all, he's almost immediately. What's the name of this church? I think this church might also still be there, folks. Um, I really do. I think the church might still be there. I'm gonna check that out. It is the first Christian church on the corner of Selma Avenue and Franklin Street. So the friend that I go to visit in Selma lives on Franklin Street. Um, I think that church is still there. How cool would that be? For her to take some pictures, for us to be like, this is where Edgar was. So Edgar almost immediately becomes a deacon. They adore him. They think he's great. He then is able to, let's get here. The congregation of this church, which numbered close to 500, quickly grew to adore Edgar. It was within just a short time of joining the church that he was made a deacon, assigned a Bible study class to teach, and was put in charge of the Christian Endeavor program, which is mostly for kids. Fellow deacons would later remark upon Edgar's gentle nature, the small acts of kindness he showed to whomever he met, and his vast knowledge of the Bible. At no church before or after was Edgar welcomed with such open arms, nor did he form so many deep and lasting friendships. That is beautiful. Let's understand this, folks. I'm going to keep reading. Church records provide ample evidence that he hosted what was arguably the most remarkable Bible study class that had ever been assembled in the Salma church. Edgar's class number 7, named for the number on the room where the class met, included Catholics, Presbyterians, Baptists, Methodists, all of them. Okay? Along with students from the Christian church. The class was so popular that they published a magazine that Edgar wrote and edited. Awesome. That'd be so my jam. That'd be so my jam. I would love to do that. Equally popular was the Christian Endeavor program that he organized. This became such a hit among local teenagers that it would receive a national award, which would be presented in Birmingham for having the most active participants or junior experts, quote unquote, ever credited to a single chapter in history of the movement. Members of that class would go on to become missionaries in Mexico, Japan, India. This is wonderful, people. He then also, like, his Bible study would also have, like, this branch that kinda broke off, like, maybe adult night, right? That they would actually join at his photo studio and hang out in the lobby, and he would play games. He would he would introduce them to new games that he was designing. This man is amazing, right? So it's like he's so good with the young to inspire them to go to Mexico, Japan, India to help others. He's so good at teaching the Bible. This Bible study group just overflows, overflows, overflows. And then the adults get want to hang out with this guy because he's so good natured, and he's also inventing fun card games and whatnot. Oh my goodness. How awesome is this? And he just moved there. He just moved there. This is all in like a year's time. He just moved there. It's great. In addition in addition to the Sunday school and the Christian Endeavor groups, Edgar sometimes participated in activities organized by the First Christian Church Ladies Auxiliary, known as Helping Hands. And they have pictures, you guys. There are pictures of him, like dressed up as a woman for some play or some kind of event. They have all these different pictures of him just being a goofball and having fun to raise money for whatever these charities want to do. It's so great. He was feeling wonderful that the postcards back home to Gertrude, as she is still recovering from TB, as there is a little baby that I shouldn't call Hugh a baby. He was actually a small child because he was what, 3 or 4, I think, when their second child passed, pretty much right after birth. So Hugh is now 5, 6 years old. So a young kid. He's writing home to them though, and I can just imagine from all the turmoil that Casey had gone through, all this up and down, being exploited, being used, all of this stuff, he is finally starting to shine and glow and do the things he loves: photography, teaching Bible study, being around people. He was definitely a people person. It's so beautiful to the point that this is written. His letters home were equally full of energy and love of life. In one note to Gertrude, he went so far as to try his hand at poetry. This is a cute little poem that Edgar wrote. I asked the roses as they grew, richer and lovelier in their hue, what made their buds so rich and bright? They answered, looking toward the light. Oh, that's so cute. Oh, great for him. I'm so excited. So, we're kind of at the top of the hour. Did he stop doing readings? He's highly involved in this church. He's in a new town. It is Selma, Alabama. Did he stop? Maybe for a little bit to get settled in and whatnot. But this one day, it had been raining for about 2 weeks, and his studio was flooded out. Nobody was coming and do anything. He was having to clean up and then clean up again and clean up again. Oh my goodness. So he's not making any money and rent is due. One rainy day, this little old lady from out of town is knocking on his door, and he lets her in, and she has this little frame, and she asks him, can you blow this up? Can you make this bigger? Can you do something with this little picture? And he says, yes. But he said, okay, how are you going to pay? She had a check that was actually from her son that is from out of state. So you would have to cash a check to get the cash from out of state. So Edgar said, hold on. He brings it to the bank. They wouldn't do it. He's like bringing it all around. He finally goes to another store that he's buddies with the guy, and he says, hey, let's just cash this. And between you and me, if it goes bad, we'll figure this out, right? Like I'll put some money towards it, you put some money towards it. We can both put money towards giving this woman the money. And if it goes south, well then, we'll figure something out. And the guy agrees. Well, so the woman gets her cash, and then she hands Casey the money to do what she needed with the photo, which could pay his rent, first of all. Well, then while he's doing all the processing, she's talking to him about how her youngest daughter is real sick, and her leg is all bented up, and there's just issues. There's issues with her youngest daughter being very sick. Edgar, instead of shying away from who he is and what he does in this whole new land that the church has fully adored him, he starts telling her about who he was in Hopkinsville. And she said, "Can you do a reading for me?" And he did. And her daughter, she took down all the information. See, once again, Leslie wasn't I don't believe, let me double check. I don't believe in that reading anybody was there. He put himself under, she asked the questions, she took the information, her daughter got healed. But based out of that, her family members kept coming. Which, of course, her family members kept coming. So Edgar actually spoke to members of the church and said, "Hey, this is what I do, but I would prefer somebody put me under. I would prefer somebody take the notes. I would prefer people there to watch, and I do want it to be in some kind of positive prayer environment." Y'all, big members of the church were on board. We're on board. And Selma, Alabama, which I'm telling you is in the middle of apparently nowhere, but it is the fastest growing little city at that time. Interesting, right? Interesting. So, my biggest thing is that we tend to think that people are not going to be accepting. But here's the truth of the matter. These people knew Edgar. They are around his energy. They knew that he knew that Bible inside and out, that he was a true believer, that gifts happen, gifts happen, prophets happen, right? He's the sleeping prophet. So, at the turn of the century, even if you were hardcore Christian, oftentimes there were things that were a bit acceptable, either based on tradition or based on the awareness on who the person is, the energy they give off. How Munzenberg was saying, "Cayce, you are doing everything in love. You're trying to do everything right. Get away from these bad guys." Well, Cayce had no bad guys down there around him, exploiting him. So people in the church were willing to help. I think that's a wonderful. And so he started actually doing more people in town, readings. The readings after readings. And the Butler family, I have to say, um, the Butler family was continuously would go to him. And I think they were a part of the bank. They own the bank or something down there. So more wealthy in that area. And here is we're gonna end on this, folks. The Butler family would also receive what was deemed at the time to be the strangest and most preposterous medical reading to date. In March 1917, Alf, which was short for Alfred, Alf requested a reading for his father, Alfred Barry Butler. That had probably been the first, who was suffering from a condition about which Cayce was given no previous information. The subsequent reading diagnosed cancer of the bladder, stomach, and kidneys, and held out little hope for recovery. The only cure, Cayce said, was an organ transplant performed by the Mayo brothers at their clinic in Minnesota. This in itself was a remarkable recommendation considering the fact that organ transplants wouldn't be done until 1954, over 35 years later. Edgar went on to suggest that the diseased organs could be transplanted from a living animal, a procedure that wasn't attempted until 1964. Despite the success of Casey's earlier reading for members of the Butler family, Alf and Roger were unable to convince their mother that such an operation was medically sound, and the recommendations were not carried out. Alfred Barry Butler died within 60 days. So Edgar, communicating, being the mouthpiece for the Akashic records in one of the trances, says, well, first of all, he needs to go up to Minnesota to those Mayo brothers. It's not like we knew the Mayo Clinic is now the biggest clinic in the United States for all the what's going on medically. At that time, it's just the Mayo brothers. They can do this. They can do this job. And he is talking about doing transplants. That was in 1917. So take this into consideration. That reading was done March of 1917. The first organ transplant wasn't actually even done until 1954. Then this concept of like, wait, we can grow organs in living animals, then take those organs and we can use them. We don't use them much anymore today because using human organs is better with other humans, right? But still possible, still a thing. That wasn't even until 1964. So my goodness, folks, Edgar is not just doing readings in Selma, Alabama. Edgar is not just thriving in the church, bringing in more young people, teaching the Bible probably the way the Bible should be taught. All sorts of great things. Gertrude does eventually come. We'll talk about it next time. But he's still also doing readings. He didn't shy away from it. He is now establishing more of who he wants to be as a young father, a businessman, a husband, and a psychic. That's beautiful. And the more we see him doing this, because yes, there's going to be some pitfalls. Yes, there's going to be some triumphant stuff. But the more we see him become comfortable in his own skin, to feel that he can turn to those in the church and say, hey, this is what I do. Are you willing to help me? What great success and outcomes are coming from it. People getting healed, information being revealed. Maybe we would have never even thought about doing transplants. I mean, I'm sure we would. Others would have thought about it. And they did. But a lot of what Edgar put out there, because it's all documented, it was the first of its kind, definitely medically. And Dr. Ben here on many of our programs with iMedu Foundation, he talked about how when he started learning about Edgar Cayce and what he wrote down as cures and whatnot, that is what led him into studying about iodine. So I hope this was fun to think about Edgar enjoying life, still doing what he wants to do, but also serving, still serving. And that is what it's about. So thank you for joining. If you like this, please hit a thumbs up. and consider subscribing. Thank you, everybody, for coming. Jackie J, I see that you came in, my dear. Shelly, Lori, Kim, Chloe, thank you all for coming. Oh, and I see Sean Paul came in. Good to see you, my dear. So, enjoy. And why don't we get a little inspiration from Edgar, at least for this brief moment of his story, as in really catering to what brings us joy. Well, it brings us joy. Bye, folks.